Then you have the supraspinatus. And the supraspinatus muscle helps to extend the humerus. Then you have the infraspinatus, and this muscle helps to rotate the humerus in a lateral rotation. Then we have the rhomboideus capitis, and the rhomboideus capitis rotates the scapula and elevates it. Then you have the rhomboideus minor. The rhomboideus minor draws the scapula forward and dorsally. Next to that you have the rhomboideus major, right here. And the rhomboideus major also draws the scapula forward and dorsally. Then you have the splenius. And the splenius helps the animal to turn and raise the head. Like we mentioned earlier, you have the latissimus dorsi, right here on the side. And the last muscle I want to point out is the longissimus. And that concludes the muscles of the back and shoulder area. The next part of the body that I want to talk about are the superficial muscles of the upper hind limb. The first one to point out would be the sartorius. And this muscle works to adduct the femur and rotate the tibia. Right underneath that muscle right here, we have the gracilis. And this muscle adducts the thigh and moves it in a posterior direction. We also have the plantaris right under here, as well as the soleus right next to it. And then I want to talk about some of the deeper muscles underneath these. So we have the vastus lateralis and the rectus femoris right here. Then the vastus medialis right under that. Then we have the iliopsoas right up in here. It's kind of hard to see. Then the pectineus, the adductor longus, and the adductor femoris. And these muscles work to adduct the thigh. Then we have the semimembranosus, the semitendinosus right here, and the gastrocnemius. And going back to those, the quadriceps femoris group that we talked about earlier, those work to extend the leg, right here. And that is the upper hind limb. Alright, now I'm going to point out some of the muscles of the lower hind limb. The first one that we talked about earlier was the gastrocnemius. And this muscle works to extend your foot. Then next to it you have the plantaris. And the plantaris helps also extend your foot, but it also helps you flex your toes. Then you have the soleus, the flexor digitorum longus, and that muscle also helps flex your toes. Then you have the tibia, which is a bone, not a muscle, and the tibialis anterior, this muscle right next to it. And that muscle helps flex your whole foot. Then you have the calcaneus tendon and your foot. And that concludes the muscles in the lower limb. The last part of my cat that I want to talk about is the superficial muscles and the deep muscles of the lower limb. First we're going to talk about the superficial ones. So the one that I want to point out first would be the semitendinosus. And that muscle is right down here. You can see it's like a band. And the semitendinosus helps flex your leg. Then we move on to the biceps femoris, and that's this really large muscle right here. Then we have the caudofemoralis. And the caudofemoralis is this muscle right up here, this little flap. And the caudofemoralis works to adduct the thigh, and it also flexes your vertebral column, but you can't find this muscle in humans, only in cats. Then you have the gluteus maximus, and that's underneath it, right here, this round muscle. And the gluteus maximus, abducts your thigh. And then next to that you have the gluteus medius. And that also adducts your thigh and also rotates it. Then you have the tensor fasciae latae, and that is this muscle right here. Then you have the sartorius, and the sartorius is this muscle up here. You can actually see it a little better on this side. It's a little band right here. And back to the tensor fasciae latae, that muscle works to adduct your thigh as well. Then we're going to move on to some of the deeper muscles of the lower limb. The first one, we're going to move this out of the way, is the semimembranosus, and that's this muscle right here. Then you have the adductor femoris, and that's this muscle right here. Then we have the sciatic nerve, and the sciatic nerve is right here. It actually runs all the way along, but I had to cut it so that I could show you the muscles underneath, and it connects right here. You can see it. Then we have the vastus lateralis, and that's this muscle right here. And then we're going to move on to the lower limb. And we have the tibialis anterior, and that's this muscle right here. And the tibialis anterior helps flex your foot. Next to that you have the extensor digitorum longus, and this muscle helps to extend your toes. Next to the extensor digitorum longus, we have the muscle known as the fibularis. And the fibularis muscle helps to flex your foot as well. Then you have the soleus, and the soleus is this muscle right in here. And then next to the soleus, we have the gastrocnemius, this larger muscle right here. And the gastrocnemius helps extend your foot. And last but not least, we have your tail right here. And that is the last part, and that concludes my muscle video of the cat.